Why reality feels like a flaw, the plain sight math of our existential crisis. We are currently navigating a state of profound epistemological vertigo. In the transition to modernity, the fundamental ground of human experience has shifted. I am is no longer the irreducible floor of reality, but a fragile hypothesis requiring constant, exhaustive proof. We have surreptitiously constructed a civilization of the gap, a structural commitment to the negation of our own existence. In this environment, the modern subject is suspended in an abstract space without an origin, haunted by the grim predicament, where the more we think, the less certain we are of the being that does the thinking. We have moved from a world of presence to a world where absence is the primary axiom, treating our own existence as a variable to be solved rather than the constant from which all life must flow. The zero-index civilization, counting from the void. The architecture of our current crisis is built upon ontological zero-indexing. Zero-indexing dictates that counting must begin with the null set, 0, rather than the unit 1. When this mathematical formalism is transposed onto human metaphysics, it creates a reality where the subject must resolve toward non-existence or painstakingly derive their being from nothingness. By treating being as a variable x, to be solved rather than an axiomatic constant 1, we are trapped in a cycle of attempting to prove the existence of the very consciousness that is conducting the proof. This represents a spectacular failure of modern philosophy. The most immediate datum of our lives, the self-evidence of presence, has been demoted to a hypothetical status. The statement cogito ergo sum, intended by Descartes as a methodological flaw, has been inverted such that the sum I am now requires the cogito I think as its legitimating proof. This represents a spectacular irony. The most immediate datum of existence, the self-evidence of consciousness, has been demoted to hypothetical status, while the void, mathematical zero, epistemological doubt, existential absence, assumes the position of primary axiom. The Brahmagupta trap, the agency of the void. This civilization of the gap is the ultimate byproduct of the Brahmagupta trap. The 7th century mathematician Brahmagupta provided a tragic disservice by operationalizing zero. His work allowed the void to be treated as a numerical entity possessing arithmetic agency. In the modern psychological landscape, zero is no longer a mere remainder. It has become an active operator. When the void is granted agency, the unit 1, representing our own presence, is no longer an irreducible given but a derived construction. We find ourselves in a mathematics of the soul where we are no longer responsible for the effect that we cause. Consequently, our presence is taken for granted and feels perpetually hypothetical. We are attempting to build the architecture of a self on the shifting sands of a primary nullity, leading to the pervasive modern sense that our existence is a mistake we can never fully justify with logic. The grim predicament, certainty as epistemic violence. The cultural ramifications of this zero-indexed ontology lead directly to the grim predicament, wherein the assertion of certainty, what the Islamic tradition terms yaqeen, is pathologized. In a world where being is a variable x that must remain open to solve, the person who claims to possess the one is viewed with suspicion. We have reached a stage where the simple recognition of reality is treated as an act of hostility or epistemic violence. To be certain is to be labeled authoritarian or logically naive. We have elevated radical doubt to the status of a supreme moral virtue, failing to realize that this intellectual humility is actually a transcendental error in the code of our existence. The intellectual humility of the skeptic mutates, becomes a symptom of mathematical misalignment, the attempt to derive unity from nullity, a transcendental error in the code of existence. The geometry of the presence of the soul, Q equals 1. To find a way out of this vertigo, we look to the corrective formalism of universal hyperbolic geometry, UHG, as developed by the mathematician Weilberger. Unlike traditional systems that float in abstract space, UHG relies on unit quadrants, Q equals 1 as a fixed point. Without this base point, relativity is not merely difficult to calculate, it is incomputable. This geometric necessity finds its spiritual counterpart in the Quranic epistemology of al-Surat al-Mustaqim, the right way. This right way is not a calculation to be performed or a point on a continuum to be reached through doubt. It is a fixed coordinate in the state space of reality. In this framework, yaqeen certainty is not an effective choice or a feeling we muster, but an ontological property of the state space the soul already occupies. We must move from a zero-indexed metaphysics of absence to a one-indexed metaphysics of presence, where existence commences with the one, and absence is merely a derivative, parasitic shadow. Pathological doubt as a refusal of the given. The radical skepticism championed as the apex of modern maturity is, in truth, an ontological sickness. This doubt constitutes a violent severance from the fitra, the primordial, unearned recognition of the real. When we demand proof for our own existence, we are committing the absurdity of attempting to solve for when we already are the constant. In the language of hyperbolic geometry, the modern subject is attempting to measure distances while refusing to acknowledge the fixed point of reference that makes measurement possible. The result is a permanent nausea. We cannot find meaning because we have treated our own souls as an arbitrary variable. This pathological doubt is not the absence of evidence, it is the refusal of the given. Conclusion: reclaiming the axiom of presence. Reclaiming our humanity requires a transition from a civilization of the gap to a civilization of the given. This is the reassertion of the axiom of presence. The understanding that Q equals 1 is the necessary foundation for any coherent geometry. To abandon zero-indexed ontology is not to abandon critical thought, but to ground it in the certainty of being rather than the anxiety of becoming. We must stop treating the soul as a hypothesis to be proven through the labor of doubt, and instead recognize it as the irreducible origin from which all coordinates of thought are drawn. Critical responsibility begins only when the variable is set. A final reflection. Are you currently treating your own soul as a hypothesis to be proven, or as the fixed point from which you view the world?